We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was produced, the Gadigal People of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. This episode contains discussion of suicide. If this raises any issues for you, support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes.
It's 2011 and rising cricket star Kath Koschel has just received the phone call she's been working towards for years. She'll represent her state of New South Wales in the game she loves. She gets straight into an intensive training regime. This is crunch time. A few weeks in, she loses feeling in her glute and big toe. She pushes on, mentioning it in passing during a routine physio appointment. She quickly discovers that something more sinister awaits. And Kath must make a choice. Abandon her dream or keep pushing? For Kath, it's a no-brainer. But weeks later, the decision is made for her when she breaks her back and is told she may never walk again. 21-year-old Kath defies the odds and is determined to get her life back on track. 5 years later, a drunk driver loses control of his vehicle and ploughs into her. She must learn to walk for a third time. At rock bottom, kindness is the only thing that gets her through. I'm at Middleton, and this is Head Game. Today, Kath Koschel on the power of kindness in the face of adversity. An absolute pleasure to have you on my podcast, Head Game. Now, you come from quite a big family, don't you? You're the youngest of 4 kids. Was it a competitive household? Was it a loving household? Did it get, ugly sometimes? Was it competitive? Or was it just a loving, normal household and you all got on just fine?
Oh, I think like any family, there was always a little bit of conflict and, rubbing each other up the wrong way and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, look, I had a very privileged childhood, not in the way that we had money. We didn't. It was a single income, 4 kids, and a house and home to feed. So we didn't have much money growing up, but we had a lot of love. My parents were awesome people. They were both hard workers and they always made sure they provided for us. So cannot fault my childhood. I was not academic by any stretch. I don't think
Join the club.
I don't think we were competitive by any nature or anything like that. We each had our own desires in what we wanted to pursue in life, my brothers and I, and we're all very, very different people in that sense. The career that I've got is very different to most of my brothers, but I guess we're a working class family. So you could never find me in a classroom at school, though. My teachers always used to say, we hate to love you because you're a cheeky little shit. But we love your attitude towards life. We just wish you'd be in the classroom a little bit more, because I was always just taking on sport. If it wasn't cricket, then I'd be playing in soccer or AFL or swimming or netball or something. I'd take up whatever sporting opportunity I could just to not be in a classroom. So that was a bit different to my brothers. One hated school, one loved it. He was really academic, and the other one was probably a mix of all of that in between. So can't fault my childhood, though. It was unbelievably awesome. Yeah.
And what was the main sport that was that sort of dominated the household?
It was cricket. I think that come from Dad. So Dad grew up in the bush. So did Mum. They both sort of come to Sydney as young adults. Met and fell in love. Had us, but we spent a lot of our childhood back where they're from, in a place called Finley. So regional New South Wales, right on the border between New South Wales and Victoria. So not much going on in Finley, and that's probably where the love of sport grew. Country Australia is very prone to, cricket, footy, that kind of stuff. And as I said, the way that I fit in with my brothers was by playing cricket. So because I was probably playing against people much older, stronger and, more capable than what I was as a little girl playing against boys in the backyard, it probably grew out that skill a lot quicker than most girls. So when we were in Sydney, I'd play in the local boys competitions, just so that it was easier on mum and dad not having to take me to other parts of Sydney, and I could sort of be dropped off where my brothers were and all those sorts of things as well. So that was the main or the common place that my brothers had was on the sporting field playing cricket, either against each other or with each other or watching each other do it, because we're in different age categories and so forth. So cricket dominated our household. If we weren't playing in the backyard, it was on the telly, watching Australia smash England, and just
you had to get that in, didn't you? Hey?
I did. I absolutely did, yeah. So it was unreal. I still love cricket to this day, still follow it very closely, and have a great love for it.
When did you realise that you actually loved cricket and that it was something that you were ultimately good at? But when did you realise the passion and the love for cricket, and was there a moment that you thought, I really want to do this as a career?
It was probably right before my first actual competitive game. My mum, being one of 4 kids, my mum and dad, they always wanted 4 kids, but there was a complication with my the brother above me's birth, and they sort of said, well, you're probably not wanting to push your body to these lengths anymore. This might be it. But they fell pregnant with me, and they were absolutely stoked to get a girl because I had 3 boys, and mum always wanted to be a mother to a girl. So, from the age of 4 to 8, I was registered in ballet and tap classes, which my mum was very enthusiastic about, but me not so much. And so when I'd be dropped off on a Saturday at the ballet studio, my brothers would be getting dropped off on the cricket field, and I kind of probably grew the courage as a 7, 8-year-old to say, look, mum, this isn't for me. I'm not into the tutus and all those sorts of things. I'd really like to try my hand at cricket. And I think that broke her heart. She was very supportive, but broke her heart. And Dad was kind of like, you beauty. He'd probably seen a little bit of potential. He'd probably seen a little bit of potential early on as I sort of faced into my brothers, and sort of got me out onto the park against the other boys, and I was able to hold my own. So probably for the next 4 years until I was about 12 when I made my first rep team. That's when I started to take it a little bit more serious and go, okay, I'm not too bad at this. And by 14, I was making New South Wales sides, in the underage categories, of course. And that was probably when I really decided that's what I wanted to pursue in life. I want to be a professional athlete. I loved cricket. I loved eating, sleeping, training, any little thing that I could do to give me that competitive advantage. I was the hardest worker in the gym. I was there first. I was last to leave, all those sorts of things. So, I wasn't naturally gifted like the Elise Perrys and Elisa Healy's of the world who, are in my sort of era and still playing and dominating and doing very, very well. So I guess what I lacked in that natural ability, I just made up for with hard work, grit and determination. So I just wanted it so bad and absolutely loved it. So still do, yeah.
Yeah, and you got a call up in 2011 to represent New South Wales. Was it a moment that you remember where you were when the call took place? And if you do, take me back to that moment.
So I was when I was 19, I'd fast-tracked my uni degree. I did sport and exercise science, and I got a call. It was from London, and they said, can you come over and play for Middlesex, so based out of Lords at the home of cricket. So to be from a tiny country Aussie town and then go and cross the other side of the world, first time out of home, playing out of Lords. I'll never forget landing there at Heathrow, and a teammate picked me up and she said, well, I'll quickly take you home for a shower. You can drop your bags off and then we're going to go train. And I was like, cool. And I didn't really think much of it. As we're driving towards training, I said, what's home for training? And she says, we're nearly there. I'll show you in a second. And the gates to Lords opened. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Wow.
Like, this is absolutely phenomenal. So, got to play on the training field next door to Lords, in at the nets there, all those sorts of things. So that was a phenomenal experience. And I spent 2 years there sort of as their opening bat person. And that's when the call came and they said, look, we've been watching your progress. Can you jump on the next flight home? We're ready to pick you for New South Wales. So off I went back to Sydney, and not long after, debuted for New South Wales, which was unbelievable, yeah. At the Adelaide Oval. I'll never forget it. Probably my favourite ground, Adelaide Oval. I don't know why. It's a really beautiful, it kind of feels like a boutique-y little ground, but there's something really warm about it, and a lot of people say that as well, not just me. So, yeah, unbelievable experience.
And what was women's cricket like back then? Was there a big hype over it? How did you feel that it compared to the men's cricket at that stage?
Yeah, it was nowhere near the profile that it is right now. It was probably on the cusp. We're about to sort of get into more professional and competitive playing. But I got injured just before the cusp of that really taking off. So we're getting paid minimal amounts. You still had to work to supplement your income back then.
I think that's important because, not only are you, living your dream and, you've made this move, but you're having to supplement. How hard was that to supplement the what you needed to have in order to focus on your cricket?
It was just a lot of juggling. Not too dissimilar to my life now. I've got a pretty unique career and I have to juggle a lot. But, it was, prior to moving to the UK to play, it was, you'd get up, go to uni, work a part-time job. I was doing personal training on the side, go to training after that, get home, quickly eat, nourish yourself, sleep, get up, do it all over again, play games on the weekend. You never got a moment spare. So if you weren't sort of traveling, doing it, you were working, you were studying, you were doing something. So it's probably a good recipe for success and a lesson in hard work because you had to do it all and you had to know how to do it all and you had to learn how to do it all. So it didn't bother me. I think it really meant that we were playing for the right reasons as well. It was a love of the game, which I'm really proud of, to be honest. And it was difficult, but life's difficult and it's a juggle. So no complaints whatsoever.
You started juggling an injury, didn't you? You're juggling a million things, and all of a sudden you break your back. Take me back to the symptoms leading up to that, and also, when that accident actually happened or that incident happened.
So as I said, I was a workhorse in the gym. So I was a hard trainer, and I'd been pushing my body to the limits up until that point as well. I was in the form of my life. I was seeing the ball like a watermelon, just tunning up most weekends and during the week as well. And we had a bit of a tournament coming up, and I I had a lot of sciatic nerve pain through my left glute, and then I noticed that my left big toe had started to feel numb, and I thought this is a bit different. And I didn't really know much about those kinds of injuries, like nerve injuries back then. And so I thought I better go and see the physio, and that was rare for me to do. I didn't really regularly check in to the physio and sit on the physio's table. And I'd made an appointment, and she said, "Kath, what are you doing? It's not often I see you here." And I said, "Look, I've noticed some symptoms. I can't feel my left big toe, and I've got some nerve pain in my left glute." And she said, "Cool, jump on the bed." And you know what sporting change rooms are like. There's not a lot of privacy in them. So, there's people getting strapped and, ointment getting splayed everywhere and all those sorts of things. And I was like, "What do you mean you can't feel your left big toe?" And I said, "I don't know. I can't feel it. It's just sort of lost. It's gone quite numb." And she sort of fiddled around and did a few tests. And she said, "Look, no training tonight. I'm going to send you for scans first thing in the morning." I thought, okay, I didn't think much of it. So I went and got the scans, and I knew the radiologist quite well just because I'd worked in sport as well, and I'd had to take other athletes up to get scans and things like that. And so his name was Trader, and I'll never forget him giving me the scans. It just had this really worried look, and I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I'm not allowed to say." And I said, "Is it serious?" He said, "It's pretty serious, Kath. Get him straight down to the doctor." So I said, okay. So I took him down to Doc Orch, and it was at the SCG, and there's a medical room there. And he had all my scans, on the lit up kind of screens. And I obviously didn't know what I was looking at. And he said, "Kath, it's quite concerning. You've got a pretty significantly prolapsed disc in your lower spine at the L5-S1 level." And I said, okay. And next minute, Brett Lee burst through the door, and he hadn't organised an appointment but needed an injection for a tour he was about to embark on overseas. And he had a look at my scans and had some back issues too. And he said, "Whoa, that's a pretty slipped disc there." And he said, "Whose are these?" to the doc. And he said, "They're Kath's," introduced us. And he said, "Look, Kath, we're not going to rule you out of the next couple of games. It's your choice. We do want you to know that there's risks associated with you playing, but it's your choice if you want to play or not." And due to, I guess, the fact that I'd never played for New South Wales up until that point, and the fact that I was in the form of my life, I was absolutely going to choose to play. But what unfolded next was probably a combination of, potentially 20 things that could have gone wrong went wrong, and it led to me ultimately breaking my back and being diagnosed as a paraplegic, which was pretty big news, as you can imagine.
Obviously, your mindset is your workhorse. You're keen as hell. You want to play cricket, so you you don't ignore it, but you're just a case of, right, I'm just going to crack on. Was that the mindset that you had? I'm just going to crack on and see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the pain and the symptoms I was experiencing were probably a little bit duller than what they would have been if I wasn't as excited at the opportunity ahead of me. And because I'd spent the entirety of my life being obsessed with the game, I don't know many people really that would throw away that opportunity if given the chance. And so I worked with the physio. Like we tried things like we had a guided double cortisone injection in my spine, which actually potentially could have played into the reason that my back broke in the end. It weakened the muscles on either side of my spine. So there's a lot of things, as I said, we don't know exactly what led to the back breaking, but it was pretty traumatic. So to describe what happened, I was fielding in cover. So I debuted and I scored 57. It was a player of the match performance. It felt euphoric, like I'd done it. I was going to retain my spot. It was amazing. But it was 4 games later that it was a bit of a non-event. I was fielding in cover and the ball got hit. That's kind of in between the batter and the bowler for anyone who doesn't know cricket very well. And the ball got hit past me very quickly and it raced off to the boundary for 4. And I thought, I'll conserve some energy and, turn around and run and get the ball and throw it back in. But it was a non-event. Nothing was going on. And as I twisted to my left to turn and chase, the disc came out so quickly that the 2 vertebrae had nowhere to go and they just went crack onto each other. So significantly that part of the bottom vertebrae cracked off and went straight into my spinal cord, and that's what left me with 0 feeling below the waist. And I've never been shot, but it felt like I'd been shot. That's the only way that I can describe it. It took my breath away, the pain. It was immediate, that shot through my body. And then it was just a blur of, medical treatment, getting me to a hospital as soon as I could. And then going through about 5 separate surgeries, unsuccessful surgeries, one after the other. You'd wake up from anesthesia and it was like, sorry, still no feeling. We'd go back to the drawing board, and most doctors had sort of given up hope on the possibility of me ever walking again after that injury. So I was lucky in a way that there was a surgeon who was just starting to make headway here in Australia, based out of the Gold Coast. He was the only one doing this kind of surgery, which is called a total disc replacement. So he'd done all of his training in the US. And my doctor sent my scans off and said, do you think we can help Kath out here? She's very fit and agile and, has had a pretty remarkable career to date, and we'd like to be able to keep it that way. But at the moment, we're looking at paraplegia. And so that doctor had a look at the scans and said, there's no guarantees here, but I'll give it a shot.
You hit the deck and you can't feel your legs. When you sort of come to, when the shock wears off, what's going through your head? Do you think I'm just paralyzed for life?
I'd actually love to chat to you about this because this was the start of a series of about 10 very unfortunate events that I had to face into over the period of about five or 6 years. And I kind of felt like when all this stuff was happening, there was never a time that I ever said, this is it, like this is the end, I'm never going to walk again. It felt like there was always going to be, it just never felt like that was going to be my reality. And I'd love to pick your brains actually on, when we look and face into, I've just spent a week with some of the most resilient people I've ever met. And there was a common theme throughout all of those people, and it was a determination to want better, to never stop, to keep cracking on. But also, I guess, in some ways, a very innocent optimism about them that allowed them to be in the right frame of mind to go, this isn't my life. Like, I'm going to do whatever I can, whatever is within my power to create a better life for myself. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I was feeling or experiencing that in that moment. It was a bit of a blur, but because it kept it was honestly, you'd go into surgery and you'd spend 5 hours under the knife, and then you've got, 2 hours coming out of anesthesia, and then that's all blurry after you come out of the anesthesia, and they go, still no feeling, mate, but we're going to go back to the drawing board and have another crack. And I think it was very innocent and potentially naive. I was just a kid. I was 21 when all this happened. I just never believed that was a life for me. And I've broken my back more than once now, and the second time was way worse than the first time, if that's believable at this point in the podcast. But and even then, there was not one person on the planet that said that I would walk again. And I walked into this studio. I can't feel one of my legs, but I still do it. So it's an interesting thing to think about. And a lot of people will often contact me and say, well, how could I possibly be as resilient as you? And I don't know the answer for them. I know what works for me. I know what makes me tick. And I always sort of say to people, you don't know what you're capable of until you have to be capable of it.
Until you're forced into that situation, until you're left with one option.
I remember being in rehab learning how to walk again. I spent 12 months there, and God, it was horrible because they're just not conducive to thriving, those environments. And I remember people with a far greater prognosis, a far better prognosis than I have, saying to me, God, you're lucky. I go, what makes me lucky? And they'd say, well, you're walking and you had a worse prognosis. And I'd often look at them and say, yeah, that's because I'm getting up and I'm trying. I'm failing every day, but I'm finding a way. And I get that when you've got a prognosis as severe as what they did, it's easy to fall into a deep, dark hole of depression and sitting in that mentality of, I just wish this wasn't my life. But sitting around and moping about it is not going to do anything. And I have empathy for it. I do. And I don't want to sound like a hard ass, kind of person or anything like that, because I genuinely feel a lot of empathy for those people. But the difference between me and them was that I was getting up and just finding a way every day. And I think that's an interesting thing to think into. And if you give yourself one option, or if there's always two choices in any situation, choose the path that's going to light you up a little bit more. If that's learning how to walk again, or losing weight, or climbing a mountain, or whatever your goal is, just find a way, have a crack, look at the choices in front of you and figure out what the best one is for you. And for me in those moments, it was, I'm going to get up. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to give it a go. And if that leads to the outcome of me walking again, then fantastic. If it doesn't, at least I had a shot. So I guess that's the way I looked at it, yeah.
Yeah, basically you're a hard ass. When's the first time that you start to feel your legs, and what was that moment like? Did it ignite a further belief of I'm going to walk again?
So what happened was I ended up going to the Gold Coast to have this surgery. It's the sixth one I had, called a total disc replacement. And the first 5 they cut through your back, as you can imagine, with a spinal cord and spinal injury. With this one, they cut through your stomach. So they shift your vital organs aside and they access your spine that way. And they put titanium reinforcement on the vertebrae. And then there's like a ball and socket joint in there. So I had that surgery. I had to lie there for 2 weeks straight after the surgery, completely in traction, unable to move. They said, don't move a millimetre. It could be the difference between you walking again or not. And so I think that's when the head noise starts, because you've got too much time on your hands. And so you're like, shit, I'm in a lot of pain. There's a lot of drugs going through my system. I can't think clearly. Am I ever going to take the steps that they're saying might be a slight possibility? But 2 weeks later, I got out of bed and I'd started to regain some feeling in both of my legs. And they said, today's the day you're going to take your first steps. It took me 90 minutes to take 2 steps, but I got it done. And the day after that, I took 4 steps, and the day after that, I took 8. And my journey into learning how to walk again had begun right there on the Gold Coast. So they said, you're not allowed to fly for 6 weeks just due to the injury and the wounds needing to heal and things like that. So I spent 6 weeks there in rehab on the Gold Coast, and then come back to Sydney and continue the process here in Sydney. But basically one day, not long after I got back from the Gold Coast, I was due to be at rehab one morning. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was lying in my bed, and I thought, wow, I can't really feel my left leg again. Something's going on here. And I thought I must have slept on it in a strange position or something like that. So I shifted myself in bed to the best I could, as best I could, and nothing come back. But I'll never forget, I remember flicking on my bedside table light, looking underneath the covers, and my entire left leg was blue, like a bruise sort of colour. I thought, geez, this isn't good. So I'm a pretty stubborn person, and I think because of my childhood and having 3 older brothers, I used to struggle a lot to ask for help. And so I remember getting up to try and, get to the bathroom, and because I couldn't feel this leg again, I just face planted onto the floor. Everything had sort of been lost. Like I'd lost all control. It was really heavy and dead. I crawled myself into the bathroom, and it was there that I realised that I had no idea if I was using the bathroom. So my surgeon, he'd given me one warning. He said, there's one thing I need you to keep an eye on throughout this process. If your bladder or bowel shuts down with a spinal cord injury, that's life-threatening. You need to get straight to an emergency room. So I didn't want to muck around knowing it could be quite serious. I crawled myself past my flatmate's bedroom, not once asking for help. I got myself into an automatic vehicle with a working right leg. I started driving myself where I was supposed to be that morning in rehab. And on the way there, I called my doctor, and he picked up at 5 a.m. And I told him what was going on. He said, Kath, bypass rehab, meet me straight at RPA, Royal Prince Alfred in Sydney. So I get to RPA and I park my car in the emergency bay. I crawled myself in, and triage nurse, she took one look at me and she said, ma'am, what on earth are you doing here? And I said, look, this is how I woke up this morning, and this is what the last 6 weeks of my life have looked like. So she picked me up and pushed me into a consult room, and it's got glass all the way around it. I can see out, they can see, and doctors start running in. So I knew it was a big deal, and they start pinning up my leg, measuring it, testing it, reading it. And it's about a half a day's worth of testing later, and they came in, or there was 6 doctors met outside my room. I knew they were talking about me because they kept pointing in and touching their legs. But every time I try and lip read what one of them was saying, they'd look away from me real quick. So I was like, oh, this is not great. If they're looking away and they can't hold my eyes, it's not good. So I'll never forget it. There was one doctor, my doctor, who walked in, and he just said, mate, I'm so sorry to let you know this, but we're going to amputate your leg. And I just went, whoa, what do you mean? And he said, we've done all the tests we can think to do. There's not enough blood getting into your leg. That's why it's turned blue and it feels really heavy and lifeless. We think this is the best possible course of action. And I said, well, that's okay for you to think that, but no one ever told me that this was a risk that I needed to think about. Like, what can I do to keep it attached? I said, all right, well, here's the deal. You're going to have it tested every single morning for the next 2 weeks. If you can get enough blood flow into it, we think we can work with that. And I said, well, paint a picture for me here, guys. And they said, all right, anyone with normal, healthy legs, depending on whether they're sitting, running, walking, crawling, whatever it is that they're doing, they've got a normal blood pressure reading anywhere between 90 and 100%. Anything below 20% is die, and anything below 10% is dead. And they said, you're at 7%. I said, so it's dead. And they said, look, it's fluctuating between 7 and 14. I said, that's hope. We can work with that. Mm-hmm. So the next 2 weeks of my life, they looked like this. I'd get up at about 4 a.m. I'd have a bit of brekkie. I'd go to hospital, get it tested if I got the all clear, because they said I needed to get it up above 20 to keep it attached. But if it dropped below 10 again, it's gone on the spot, they said. So I'd get the all clear if it was above 10, obviously, and then I'd get to work. I had those Canadian crutches, the ones that wrap around your forearms, and they said to me, it's a blood flow issue, so exercise is your best friend here. You need to pump as much blood into that leg as you can. But to paint a picture, I would hop on my right leg with those Canadian crutches and my left just drag about a half metre behind me. Like, my shoes would get worn down. It was really confronting stuff to look at. So I'd use the help of the doctors in that hospital room, and then I'd go home and I'd have a bit more brekkie to sustain myself, and then I'd go to the local gym. Personal trainer was helping me to assist me get into machines and stuff. I'd go back home, I'd have lunch, I'd go back to the gym. My family and friends were helping me. I'd go back home and I'd try and sleep after eating. But I don't reckon I need to tell many people how hard sleep is to come by when you're stressed out. It was impossible for me during that 2-week period. So I got sick of tossing and turning in bed, and I had a 24-hour access pass to the Sydney Cricket Ground, the SCG. I drove myself into the cricket ground one night. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I crutched myself from the empty car park into the gym of the SCG. I turned the lights on, and security guards come rushing in thinking I was an intruder, because I was absolutely not supposed to be there. And they got to the gate and they said, Kath, what on earth are you doing? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said, I know. I said, but here's the challenge I got ahead of me. And rather than kicking me out, Bobby, he was in his 80s. He was always on that night shift. He went back to his post, and he come back about 5 minutes later, and he was holding a roll of electrical tape. What's he doing here? And he said, look, Kath, I'm not a doctor or a medical expert, but why don't I help you into the spin bike? I'll strap your leg in there with the electrical tape so it doesn't fall out. I've got to go back and man the TVs. If you need me, you can call me, but I'll come back in 45 minutes. I'll unstrap your leg and I'll help you into whatever machine you need to get into. And I realised something pretty profound for the first time in my life. One, that we can't do everything alone. Like, we need help sometimes, and it's okay to have that help. But two, Bobby was absolutely right. He wasn't a doctor or a medical expert. Bobby was simply a man who cared, and he saw a person in need. He knew he had the power and the means to be able to help me, and he did. And I thought to myself, if I keep this leg attached or not, I'm going to pay forward the kindness this man's just afforded me, because in that moment when I felt alone, vulnerable, lost and afraid, his actions, which were very small, meant the absolute world to me. And I knew that I'd be okay regardless of what happened. So it was probably the catalyst for the rest of my life, turning into what it is today and the movement that I've created with Kindness Factory. But I'll progress the story with a leg. People might be wondering, is it real? All that kind of stuff. I got to deadline and I couldn't get the pressure back up, they said, so it's got to go. And I was okay with that, so long as I'd tried my very best to keep it attached. And I don't really remember much about this story. My dad tells it pretty well. I woke up one morning, the night before I was due to be amputated. I was staying at Mum and Dad's. They were going to take me in for that surgery. And I woke up at about 2:00 in the morning feeling pretty crook. I went to get a glass of water and I collapsed unconsciously onto the floor. Dad heard the thud. It woke him up. He picked me up, put me in the car and took me to the nearest hospital at St. George. And they did an entire body scan and realised I was bleeding internally from that stomach wound I mentioned earlier. What happened was, in closing up that wound, the surgeon, of course very accidentally but very slightly, nicked the femoral artery that ran into my leg.
You are joking me.
Yeah, so because I had extensive nerve damage and a limited supply of blood now due to that accident, it simply meant that the limited supply of blood, it wouldn't carry into that damaged nerve system. So I was raced off for more emergency surgery, and 3 or 4 hours later, as anaesthesia's wearing off, I start feeling around, like, is my leg attached? The doctors could see the stress I was under, and they come rushing on over. They said, yes, mate, that is your real leg, but you are very unhealthy and you're not out of the woods yet. If you want to keep your leg attached and if you ever want the chance at walking again, off to rehab you go. 12 months of it, no guarantee you got a leg or that you're walking at the end of it, but that's the only place for you right now. It's too unsafe for you to go home. So off to rehab I went.
So, Kath, all was this time that you're cycling in the gym and you're trying to get the blood flow to your leg to keep it, you're bleeding internally. So what did they do? Did they mend that, heal that, and say, look, you've got one more chance, 12 months, off you go, and we take it from there?
Pretty much, yeah. That's exactly what happened. They fixed the bleed and then they set off to rehab you go. So rehab was easily the toughest place I've ever been to, just because it's a tricky spot, because it feels like it's a step down from hospital in terms of the facilities maybe, but then also there's a lot of people doing it tough in there, and so it's not, you become your environment in some ways, so it's hard to stay upbeat and optimistic when you're around that many sick people. And I'll never forget day 6 of rehab. I was absolutely battling with my environment, my injuries, and I didn't really know what to do, and I ended up calling my best mate just for a bit of advice and help. And I said, look, I don't think I can do this. Can you come and pick me up? If my leg goes, then so be it. I can live without a leg. I just don't think I've got this in me for the next 12 months. And it's probably the first time that I accepted the reality of my situation, and probably failed a little bit in that optimism perspective. But I'll never forget what she said to me, because it was tough love. And I think it's the difference between being nice to someone and between being kind to them. She said, I won't come and pick you up from rehab, Kath, because I know that will be to the detriment of your health. What I will do is I'll promise you this: if you call me at any other day, I promise you I'll answer that phone and I'll come in and I'll hold your hand if I have to, but we'll take these steps together and we'll get it done. And I'll never forget that, because sometimes in life we need to show up for people in that way. We can't just coddle them through it and appease them and enable them. We need to actually give them the tough love that they need to hear to be able to progress into what they need to do to get it done.
And that's a difficult decision to make, especially someone that's seeing you suffer. And the easy option is just to, go, let's just cut it off and, stop the suffering as such.
Yeah.
But that's a true friend, for someone to step up like that and go, do you know what? No. Because she knows ultimately that you're having a wobble, you're having a bad day, because she knows you like yourself, and this isn't the Kath that I know. And so no, I'm not going to come and pick you up. I'm not going to, we're not going to quit. We're not going to end this right here. We're going to exhaust every single option. That must have felt so good to hear.
I think it was absolutely amazing, because I was battling before this phone call, but then it kind of lit a fire in my belly, and I just said, right, I'm here for the next 12 months. I either have a crack and I I get what I can out of this experience, or I sit down and be sad about it. And so I just put myself to task, learning how to walk again when everyone's telling you it's pretty impossible. That's a pretty big challenge. But I think like any challenge, if you break it down into small bite-sized chunks, it'll become a lot more manageable. So my plan was I'll go from bed to chair, chair to frame, frame to stick, sticks to stick. If I've got to crawl, I will, but I'll make sure that I keep moving. And every day I'd get incrementally better, and I just had to keep showing up. And every day that I continued to show up, which was every day, I did get a little bit better, and feeling started to regain, and movement became a bit easier. But rehab became a lot easier for me by way of meeting the love of my life about 4 weeks into my stay. So rehab's a pretty lonely place, and to have found romance in rehab was not something I
How the hell did you do that? Kath, come on, tell us your secret.
I will tell you the story. It's the furthest thing from graceful you've ever heard in terms of how two people have met. But I was in hydro, I was in the pool, and I'm, those noodle things. I've got two sort of physios behind me and all that, and they said, session's done. And I said, okay, so I'm gracefully, not very gracefully at all, trying to pull myself out the pool. And I've kind of cocked one leg up, the one that I can feel, onto the thing, and I'm dragging myself out of this water. As I look up, there's someone going on their orientation of rehab, Jim. And I thought, geez, he's handsome. And I kind of smiled at him and
straight away. It's like, I'm in the most vulnerable position here, but you're handsome as hell.
You're handsome as hell, exactly. And I don't know why. I think immediately as I looked at him, I'm like, I feel like I'm going to have a lot in common with him. He was an ex-rugby player, so I could tell that he was athletic like I was. And I thought to myself as I got dried at the pool deck, he looked pretty overwhelmed. That's a pretty confronting thing day one of rehab when you're in orientation. He could probably use a friend. So I took it upon myself to just show him the ropes, where to get hydro from, where to get the good yogurt from if you need a snack. And really quickly, we learned that we had a lot in common. And as the days went on and the more time we spent together, we ended up falling in love, which is a little bit funny because who finds love in a rehab centre? I certainly didn't think I would. Yeah. But it was a truly special time. Like, I look back with so much fondness in that moment, or in the moments that we got to share together, which is a weird thing to say because rehab's not a very nice experience to have to go through. So to have found love, we were like normal young kids in love. But I think really what spurred our recovery on, if I'm honest, was, we're going through the grind of rehab every day. What's the reward that we get to look forward to at the end of this process, so we can be really proud of how we met and what we got through. And so for us, we just dreamed of a life that would exist once we finished rehab. So for us, it was, 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl like my family. When we're out of here, we just want to go. Like, we want to have a great life together. And in that respect, it was like, I actually remember feeling quite grateful that I broke my back, because I was like, well, I know I can't play cricket anymore and my sporting career is over, but I found something that felt so much grander than being an athlete, which was love and wanting to spend the rest of my life with someone. So that was a pretty phenomenal feeling that I got to lean into in that moment as well. So no regrets in that respect for sure. But yeah, a beautiful moment, a beautiful reflection to always get to look back on. But unfortunately, 12 months into our relationship, we ended up losing Jim via suicide. So I'd finished rehab. We'd been going out for 12 months, and now I was an outpatient. So I visited rehab 3 mornings a week, and then I could go home or to work and transition back into normal life. And Jim had a day to go before he was to be considered an outpatient. We'd put the lease on the house together, and the dreams that we were dreaming were going to come true the next day. And that night, unfortunately and very inexplicably, felt like it was completely out of the blue. He passed away via suicide, and that just left me feeling crushed. I felt so, I hit rock bottom in every single way possible. I didn't know it was possible to experience that amount of pain, emotionally, physically, everything. First I lose this dream. The one thing I'd wanted to do since I was a little girl was to play cricket for Australia, and unfortunately that left me. But then I lost the person that taught me there was so much more to life than hitting a ball around a park. And I learned a few things at rock bottom. The silver lining of rock bottom, I think, for anyone who's there right now, is that there's only one way to go. You got to go up when you're at rock bottom. And I'll never experience anything harder than that. I know that now, which I guess that could be the silver lining of all of this, in that sense, that days will always be easier than that day. I genuinely believe that. But I really, I guess, in the aftermath of his passing, I kind of lost myself, not in a way that I didn't ask for help or anything like that, but I guess the enormity of those two experiences hit me like a ton of bricks. And I genuinely I never thought I'd ever be happy again. I thought, I'll be fine, I'll be okay, but I never thought I'd ever experience true happiness again within myself because of those experiences. And that was a hard reality to have to face into, but it was through, I guess, reflection throughout that adversity where there was so much opportunity for goodness as well. The world is a pretty decent place if we choose to see it that way, and I had to find that light again, and I did that through, it was actually very accidental, but I took myself to the Gold Coast where we were going to start our life together, and I was very alone and vulnerable in that moment. And I was at Jim's mum's house one day, and there was a piece of paper on this coffee table and a pen. And she later told me it was there for a shopping list. And I don't know why, but at my rock bottom moment, for whatever reason, I thought of people in my life who had shown up for me, doctors, family, friends. And I picked up the pen and I started writing down their names on this list of paper. One name turned into 10, and the next thing I knew, there was 30 names on this bit of paper. And I'll never forget it. At my rock bottom moment, genuinely never thinking I'd ever be happy again, I remember holding this bit of paper in front of my face and saying to myself, Kath, if nothing else, this is 30 reasons to keep going.
Ultimately, does that finally get you out of this headspace? And how do you progress from there?
It was a catalyst for turning it all around. I'm not going to say that, gratitude changed my life in that it was the stepping stone into a bit more in-depth work that I had to do from a processing standpoint and leaning on some other people to get some help there as well. But it was absolutely the way that I turned my life around and flipped it back on, I guess, the path of being me again, if that makes sense. And so I ended up back at rehab not long after that, just for a routine checkup, nothing out of the ordinary. I was walking again at this moment, and had successfully taught myself how to walk again after that first rehab experience. And I was having a conversation with my medical team. There's about 10 of them in this room, and they said, mate, we've got some good news for a change. We're actually ready to discharge you. Before you go, have you got any questions? You can come back or give us a call at any moment and we'd welcome you back, but you don't have to keep coming back as regularly. And I said, yep, that's fantastic news. I've got one question. Maybe it's more of a statement, but I really miss being able to play cricket. I miss the competitive nature of sport. I can't feel anything below my left kneecap, and I can't dorsiflex my toes on the left side. That's just the consequence of that injury. So it rules out batting as a right-hander. So I can't really play cricket. Is there anything else you think I could do? So they had to think for a second. They said, look, your recovery was based in a pool and on a bike, and you're very strong in those disciplines. If you added in a run, you'd be a really good triathlete. Why don't you give that a crack? I thought, right, I'll give it a crack because I know I'll love the training for it. So I signed up for a tester.
Straight into a triathlon.
Straight into a triathlon. I'd never done one before in my life, mind you, as well. But I absolutely loved this tester. I loved it. I loved getting back, just moving my body. It felt good. And so I ended up being the first person with my disability to do a half Ironman. I did it in 2015 on the Sunshine Coast. And I did so well that I qualified for a full Ironman. So that's a 3.8K swim, 180 kilometre bike ride and a marathon to top it off. And training was on track. I was the fittest I've ever been in my life 4 months out from this event. And with my best mate, we were going on a training bike ride from Cronulla, the south of Sydney, to Manly, the north of Sydney, to have breakfast and then go back. It was about a 90K round trip, so nothing in the grand scheme of the training. And I got to the north side of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It was the 10th of January in 2016, and it was a beautiful day. And I started making my way toward a right-hand turn lane, and suddenly just felt a thud on my body and everything went black. I got hit by a drunk driver from behind and broke my back again. So it was a...
Wait. So after everything that you've been through, you're starting to get your life on track. You've dived into, again, something that's, giving you a purpose, giving you ambition and drive. And you're on your bike and you get hit by a drunk driver. you break your back again, and you just wake up in hospital, and then
I woke up from a coma 2 weeks later to the news that I was paralysed. My back was broken in 4 places. I dislocated my neck, my right wrist was broken, and my left hip was shattered. I had no recollection of the accident. I'll never forget the first sight I had was of my parents, who are easily the most supportive people I've ever known. And I barely recognised them because in the 2 weeks that I was out of it, they'd each lost about 10 kilos. They'd never left my side, my parents. They'd sort of tag team and go and have a shower, and then they'd come back, hold my hand and sit there with me in that coma. And I thought to myself for the first time in my life in that moment, I would have been 28 or something at that point, God, I'm the lucky one here. I'm not them having to watch this. I'm just having to sit here and endure it. And it was touch and go. I was in a pretty serious medical state there, and my inspiration for staying alive was just do not put them through anything more. They've been through enough with you, and they don't deserve to have to put you in a box. And so I just kept breathing, and that's the thing that kept me alive, was just I didn't want to put my folks through any more adversity and the pain of loss. And so I breathed a little deeper. I spent 6 weeks in ICU fighting off infection on the daily. I went onto the wards for 6 weeks, and then I went on to rehab for 6 months to teach myself how to walk again when every person on the planet told me it was impossible. So I think perspective's got to be one of the most powerful gifts that we have, like the ability to see through the lens of another person and potentially consider what they're enduring in that given moment. And that certainly was a great and powerful tool for me in that hospital room and throughout that recovery process. I knew that it would be a far harder thing to have to watch someone struggle that you care about in that way rather than have to actually just do it. Similar to what you were saying earlier, when you're going through something like that, you get 2 choices. It's really simple. You have a crack or you don't. And if you have a crack, you might walk again. And if you don't, you definitely won't. And so that was really easy for me. I just had to go through that.
And also, don't underestimate the power of positive thinking, to these small goals, and just have that positive mindset, because the moment you allow that little ounce of negativity to sink in, that grows just as quick as the positive thought, right? So it's phenomenal. Yeah,
it was kind of back to square one, having to learn how to walk again. And I when I say everyone, I'm talking specialists from around the world saw the scans, and they were like, there is no way this woman is going to walk again. But it did. And it was a moment. I remember being told that I'd never walk again. And like, no, but we're really serious this time. It's actually not going to happen. There was 6 doctors that told me that. And I was in the consult room, and I was in a wheelchair, and I wheeled myself out of this room. And I was like, shit, is this real this time? Like, is this going to happen? And I'll never forget, I remember wheeling myself to the elevator to get downstairs into my rehab room, and I couldn't reach the elevator button. It was about centimetres out of reach, and I just kept reaching, and I just couldn't get myself high enough in this chair. And that was probably the first time I was like, shit, this is going to be the rest of my life. Like, am I going to struggle like this for the rest of my life? Like, I don't want this kind of life. And nothing against anyone in a wheelchair, because it was me there for a while, and it was just a hard reality to have to face into, that's for sure. And a man saw that struggle. It was a pretty empty corridor, and a bloke saw it. And I had my head in my hands, just feeling pretty crushed in this moment. And he pressed the button for me. And I didn't even realise it until I heard the ping of the elevator. It goes ding. And I was like, someone's pressed it. And I looked up, and he was sort of walking off into the distance. And he kind of turned around and nodded at me, and I kind of nodded back, but we didn't exchange any words or anything like that. But I wheeled myself into the elevator. I got downstairs, and I don't know why, but it lit a fire in me. It just felt like he believed in me, similar to that conversation I had with my best mate when I was struggling that time.
Mm-hmm.
And got myself into the room. I looked in front of a mirror. I pulled myself out of the chair to stand up, even though I couldn't feel my legs. Leant on the wall, looked in the mirror, and just said, "You're going to walk again." And I did. And I was still pretty ginger. But then really what transformed my life was I had to go to court and face this man that hit me with his car in court. And it was a 3-day process, and it was nearly a hit and run. He'd never said sorry for it either. And the first day he didn't even show up to court. So it frustrated me, because I was like, that's pretty offensive. The second day we learned about the charges, and the third day as charges are handed out and it's all ending, pretty emotional scenes, but people are spilling out the courtroom. And I had to remind myself, this guy didn't intentionally harm me. It was a big mistake. I make at least 10 of them a day. Kept thinking, thankfully, none of my mistakes have changed the course of someone's life like this. So that's what got me into the courtroom. But as the courtroom's spilling out, this bloke breaks down in tears on the floor. And I walked over to him with my crutches and I put my hand on his shoulder. I said, "Mate, are you okay?" And he looked up at me and he said, "No, I'm not." And I said, "I can see that. How are you getting home today?" And he said, "I don't know. I can't afford a taxi. And I obviously can't drive. I've lost my license." And I said, "Okay." And my dad, my old man, is the toughest man I've ever known. He was a cop for 40 years. He's seen some stuff, my dad, and we see the world a bit differently, Dad and I. And he was there in support of me, and he's over on my shoulder at this point. And I looked down at the man. I said, "Look, we'll give you a lift." And he said, "I don't think that's a very good idea." And Dad says, "Kath, that is definitely not a very good idea, mate." Kind of threatening in a way. But we did. It was a 15-minute ride, and you could have heard a pin drop. And Dad was driving. He was in the front, and I was in the back. And we get out the front of this guy's house. He's never said thanks for the ride or sorry about the accident. He just looks at me and he said, "Why did you just do that?" And I said, "Because your actions don't control mine. I would have done that for any other person on the planet. I'm not going to let your actions change the person that I am." So he shuts the door. He gets out. I thought, I'll jump in the front with Dad. So I get in the front with Dad. We're sitting there and he's got his hands on the wheel, but we're not moving anywhere. And I was like, "What's going on here?" So I looked to the toughest man I've ever known and he's just got these tears coming out his face and nearly broke me to see my old man that way. I'd never seen him cry. He had throughout my recovery, but he'd kind of protected me from the pain of seeing that. And I said, "Oh, Dad, what's wrong?" And he said, "Look, Kath, before I go on, I need you to know your mum and I, we're so proud of you, we are. But my God, it's hard to be your parent sometimes. Like, why have I just given that man a lift home when..." Kath, he said, "The hardest thing I've ever had to do as a man is watch you crawl through life as an adult. I had to watch you crawl, mate, and it nearly broke me. I never want to have to do that again. And I've just given the man who is responsible for that a lift home, and I don't know why I've done it. Can you explain it to me?" I said, "All right, Dad. At a young age, you actually gave me a poster that I hung above my bed and it had a quote on it. Do you remember this?" He said, "Yeah, it's still in your old bedroom. What does it read again?" I said, "The quote says, 'The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion.'" And he said, "It does too." I said, "Do you mind me asking, Dad, why did you give that to me? You could have given it to any one of us kids. You got 4 of them." And he says, "Kath, mate, I hate to break it to you, but I'm pretty sure I got it for free at work." And so he kind of ruined this like special moment that we had together. But then we're able to sort of to shift the dialogue on that. And how I sort of want to articulate this is, I don't watch news anymore, but I used to. And we'll go onto the news at 6:00 tonight, most of us, or we go onto social media and we see a lot of hate in the world. There's bullying in a schoolyard, there's domestic violence, there's gun violence, there's war, there's terrorism. There's a lot of unnecessary suffering going on in the world. Life is bloody hard at the best of times. We get cancer diagnosis, we lose people, natural disasters happen. We don't need to make life harder on each other by causing and inflicting pain on each other. We simply just don't need to. That's man-made. And often we see hate and we respond to hate with hate. So you call me something, I'll come up with something even tougher and call you that back. You hit me, I'll hit you back. Where does it stop? And I guess through moments like Bobby, the security guard at the SCG who helped me out when he didn't need to and was well within his rights to kick me out, and the man who pressed the elevator button, there was a lot of kindness that was shown to me throughout my periods of adversity that really turned things around for me. So here's what I did, and I got home after this experience with my dad. We had a good cuddle and a lunch and a beer and all that kind of stuff. And then I thought, you know what? I genuinely think that if the world had a little bit more kindness in it, a lot of the things that people are experiencing, mental health crisis, loneliness, domestic violence, all this suffering that's occurring as a result of our own being, mind you, could be resolved. So I said, I'm going to put kindness on the map. Here's what I did. I said, on this day at this time, I'm leaving my home with nothing but the clothes on my back, no cash, credit card, food or water. In order to survive, I'm only going to accept help of strangers. So family and friends can't help me. And I didn't know how long I'd last. I get pretty hungry. But I ended up reaching news stations all around the world. And I got 10,000 people that reached out to help me. They said, I'll feed you. I'll get you from A to B. You can come and sleep in our house. We can pay for a train fare or a boat fare or a plane fare. And I ended up traveling for 2 months to every single state in Australia. And it changed the course of my entire life. Like it genuinely changed my entire mindset. I was like, bloody hell, you know what? The world is a bloody good place. It really is. We're just not celebrating it enough. And
so you ended up forcing kindness onto other people ultimately. That's very smart of you. That's very cool.
Yeah. One, because I knew that the people that would reach out to help me would have their own story, and they did. And they had a story that would break your heart. They did. And I reckon every single person listening to this has a story that would break your heart. You might be sitting next to someone that has a story that you don't even know about. Why are we making life harder than it needs to be? Let's just help each other out a little bit more. And so I come back from that. I kind of got to 2 months and I was like, I'm exhausted because I was sharing it and documenting it. It's now a best-selling book and there's talks of movies and things like that in the process. But all these people kept reaching out going, this is phenomenal what you're doing. I can't help you because you're not, near me or something like that. But I wanted to let you know, Kath, I was really inspired by your journey. Today, I mowed my neighbour's lawn, or I donated blood, or kids were sending me messages like I tied my sister's shoelace or something like this, right? So I just went, you know what? There's a lot of good people out there doing a lot of good things. This is less about me and more about all of us collectively trying to, make this world a little bit better. And so I flipped the website and I said, if you want to submit an act of kindness here that you've done for someone or someone's done for you, please do so. It's at kindnessfactory.com. I set a goal right then. It was audacious to reach 1 million acts of kindness. I never thought we'd get there. I remember when my mates would rib me and they'd go, what are you going for again? I'd go, 1 million. Like, where are you at? I said, we've got 10. They'd go, you're a long way from I'd say, you're a long way from 1 million. I was like, yeah, but we're 10 in from 0 and you've got to start somewhere. But as I sit here today, we've just clicked over 8 million acts of kindness from all around the globe. Yeah.
Do you know what, Kath? You are one phenomenal human being. You've put a smile on my face. Listen, your act of kindness is you've set me up for the day. Kindness is something that's free. It's been amazing having you on my podcast, Head Game, and talk about the power of positive mindset. You are the epiphany of that. Thank you ever so much. Love you millions. You're absolutely what the world needs. And thank you ever so much for taking the time to come on my podcast, Head Game.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
To find out more about Kath's work with the Kindness Factory, head to kindnessfactory.com. Thanks for listening to this episode of Head Game. If you know someone who might benefit from listening to this powerful conversation, I encourage you to share it with them. I'm Middleton. See you in the next episode.